Hello everybody, I'm Silleaf. This will be the one-shot entitled As the Candle Goes Out by Red Lemonade on AO3. Summary: Izuku's never had to celebrate his birthday alone before. The apartment felt hollow, a vacuum of silence that stretched endlessly in every direction. Izuku sat hunched over at his dinner table, the weight of the stillness pressing down on him. The dim yellow light from the kitchen bulb cast long shadows across the room, dulling the colors and turning everything pale and lifeless. It felt like a scene out of someone else's life, not his. He wanted to believe it wasn't real, that any moment now he'd wake up to the sound of her soft footsteps and the faint clatter of pans from the kitchen. But reality sat before him, undeniable and cruel, in the form of a single cupcake. It was small, store-bought, and imperfect. The pink frosting had smudged slightly on one side, a careless flaw he hadn't bothered to fix. A single candle leaned in the center, its wax already pooling at the base where it had melted unevenly. The tiny flame wavered, delicate and fragile, as though it too felt out of place in the suffocating quiet. He stared at it, unblinking, the flickering light reflecting in his glassy green eyes. His gaze drifted slowly, unwillingly, to the seat diagonal from him. It was empty, of course, just a plain wooden chair, slightly worn at the edges from years of use. His chest tightened, his breath catching in his throat as he imagined, for the briefest moment, her presence there. His mother, seated comfortably with that warm smile on her face, her hands resting on the table, fingers curled slightly, as if she were about to reach for him. He could almost hear the gentle hum of her voice, the way she'd fuss over him for not eating properly or forgetting to clean up. He could almost feel the way her love wrapped around him like a blanket, constant and unwavering. But the chair remained empty. The table, too, was bare except for the cupcake and the faint traces of wax spilling onto the frosting. There was no warmth, no hum of her voice, no light that belonged to her. There would never be again. Izuku's chest ached, a hollow, gnawing pain that felt like it was pulling him apart from the inside. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers curling tightly against the fabric of his pants until his knuckles turned white. The air felt heavy, pressing down on him with the weight of everything he'd lost. Tears blurred his vision, and his throat burned as he swallowed back the sobs threatening to rise. The first tear fell silently, landing with a faint pat against the table. Then another, and another, until they came out in a steady stream, carving hot, stinging trails down his face. He blinked, and the cupcake blurred, the pink frosting and tiny candle reducing to a smear of colors through his tears. He sucked in a breath, sharp and trembling, his shoulders beginning to shake as he tried and failed to keep himself composed. A faint noise escaped him, choked and stifled, as he brought a hand up to his face. His fingers pressed against his mouth, muffling sobs that clawed its way out of his chest. His other hand trembled as it gripped the edge of the table, his nails scraping faintly against the wood. His body shook with each suppressed cry, the pain too much to contain, spilling out in waves that left him gasping for air. The flame on the candle flickered again, shrinking slightly as the wax burned lower. Izuku's eyes dropped back to it, his vision swimming. The tiny light felt impossibly distant, as though it belonged to a world he no longer had access to. It was just a cupcake, just a candle, but it carried the weight of everything he'd lost. It was supposed to be a celebration, a small acknowledgement of the life he was still living, but all it did was remind him of the life that had been taken away. The tears came faster now, dripping steadily onto the table and the frosting below. The soft plinks of water meeting wood echoed faintly in the stillness. His sobs grew quieter, softer, as though the grief had stolen even his voice. He pressed his hand harder against his mouth, his body folding in on itself as he wept. The pain was overwhelming, a crushing force that left him feeling small and broken. The wax on the candle had nearly burned down to the base, the flame flickering weaker with each passing second. Izuku couldn't bring himself to move, to blow it out, or to stop the tears, or to even sit up straight. He just sat there, shoulders trembling, as the silence swallowed him whole. His tears fell unchecked, pulling on the table, the cupcake, and his lap. The emptiness around him felt infinite, and no matter how tightly he gripped the edge of the table, he couldn't stop himself from sinking into it. He didn't know how long he stayed there, crying quietly in the dim light of the apartment. The cupcake remained untouched, its candle burning down to nothing but a small puddle of wax. The room grew darker, the flickering flame finally extinguishing itself, leaving him alone with the weight of his grief and the silence that stretched on, unbroken and merciless. Alright, everybody, that concludes the one-shot As a Candle Goes Out. Please make sure to join the Discord if you haven't already. If you would like to get updates easier, get connected with people within the fanfiction community, make requests for a podfic, and more. The link to the server will be in the description. I know this video was a bit shorter than the ones I usually do, but I really liked this fic, and I thought it was well written. They do also have a TikTok. I will also link that in the description because that is what this fic was based on. Now, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening.